Welcome, everybody. Strap in because we have a wild live show for you here today. We are the Fantasy Formula. We're getting you ready for the Canadian Grand Prix. By now, you probably all know me, but today in the hot seat, we have our friend Terry from F1 Coffee Corner here with you for the whole hour. Terry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. As you can see, I'm not Rob. I'm here for the whole hour. Anything can happen. So if they're not already tuned in, people should be, because this is going to be wild on every front, really, after that 3 practice sessions.
We have a lot to talk about here, Terry. But first off, I just want to call out you yourself have had a fantastic week. Terry announced that he signed with WTF1 Talent, which is the home of a lot of the best content creators in our whole space. So, Terry, on behalf of Rob and myself and the Fan Amp community, congratulations, my friend.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be some great opportunities to get some great content out there. So, no, it's been a while sort of sorting it all out, but I'm glad it's done, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what it means for you in the next steps. This
Yeah.
is going to be really exciting. Say hello to some folks in the chat. Hey, Mike. Hi, Mark. Our Fan Amp friends are in the chat. That's terrific. So, Terry, let's talk about free practice a bit, because certainly between the weather and the changing conditions we expect between qualifying later today and tomorrow, how much can we glean from the free practice results?
It's really hard. I mean, we were just talking off air, and some teams are looking particularly strong. Some teams we're looking at, is it a particularly strong lineup in the sense of it's going to carry on into qualifying and into the actual race itself. We know Mercedes, prime example, who've normally been good on a Friday. So is this just a case of it's a day delayed because of what happened yesterday, and that we're expecting them to drop off? And when we just look at what on earth happened to Ferrari, to be honest, I mean, that's just a head scratcher. They're obviously head scratching, as we saw. So it's one of those where I think it's all to play for. And with rain due for qualifying, that's going to certainly mix up the grid, ready for the race itself. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah, reports from the track are already coming in that rain is starting to fall. So I imagine that at least Q1 is going to be quite wet, and we're going to have some interesting results. Perhaps we can pull up some of the timetables from FP3 just to give you a flavor of what Terry's talking about in case you missed free practice earlier today and yesterday. You can see here, it's been all Mercedes through the first few practice sessions. Lewis Hamilton looks dominant at this circuit. We're going to talk a little bit about driver form around Canada, but Lewis is really picking up where he's left off in previous seasons, Terry. Really good performance from him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Lewis likes his track, and it's probably one where you might lean towards him in terms of selecting, because when he does finish, he tends to finish quite well here. It's a track he likes. Those mixed conditions suits him. We know the mixed conditions will play into the deficit that Mercedes have had over the past few races as well. New upgrades on the car, obviously for Lewis, not George himself, but Lewis has got a new feel to that car as well. So he's got a very positive vibe. He seems happy with it, and I don't think it's all weather related. He seems very in the zone and very comfortable when you look at him.
The other team that had been looking really good in the early practice sessions is Aston Martin, certainly sharing that same power unit as Mercedes. What do you make of Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso through the first few sessions?
Again, I think that straight line speed that they struggle with isn't as evident here. So it's no surprise that the two teams who have been struggling over the past few races with that speed has actually got it back for this race to put them in a position. So again, I think certainly Fernando around here is probably looking a bit tasty. But even Lance, obviously knows the track well. His position has been good. He's been up there for the practice sessions that he took part in yesterday and obviously today. So I think that Aston Martin might be a dark horse to sneak in there. I still feel there's more to come from Ferrari and McLaren anyway, but I would certainly expect to see a more revived Aston Martin around here.
And for those of us that have been running Ferrari in recent weeks, you have to scroll all the way down to see Charles Leclerc at P10 and Carlos Sainz at P12. We talked a little bit about this off air, Terry, but could you give us a hypothesis of why Ferrari found themselves so low in the timetables after FP3?
I think it's set up. I think it's engine modes as well. We've got a couple of teams who don't like running engine modes. We've heard about this a lot happening on the Friday, not so much on the Saturday, obviously. But teams, especially if they're using older engines, Red Bull being the one, we know that he's been swapping the engines in Max's car. So if he's got an old engine in, it's going to have mileage on it. They're not going to want to add too much mileage and too much stress on it. So they're going to want it turned down as well. So I think we have got an element of engine turned down from some of the top teams. McLaren are notorious for it in terms of their Friday sessions. They're very prone to turn their engine down. And we can see from the graph here, if you look at that, Red Bull, McLaren, they've got their turn down, but Mercedes is the one that kind of still stands out like a sore thumb in that mix.
Yeah, between Terry and formula data analysis that you see here, I'm starting to learn about the impact of top speed in the session and what that means for your engine mode. You can see two real clear level offs here, one at the top in the 331, 332 range, and then the next level. So the good news here is that Ferrari appear to be turned down a bit compared to some of the other constructors, and they'll probably end up better than Aston by the end of it. But on the other hand, Mercedes, for how fast they looked, being turned down to the same order as Ferrari, makes you believe that at least Lewis Hamilton's looking for real this weekend.
Yeah, especially when you compare customer teams. So you've got Williams and Aston Martin with their straight line speed, obviously sharing the same engines as Mercedes, has share the Ferrari engine. So you'd expect Sauber do as well. So you'd expect those manufacturers to creep back up with their top line speed. Maybe not as much because they're more aerodynamically sort of structured to the straight line speed ones, but you still expect them to be a lot closer than that.
Absolutely. Good. Let's head over to the chat because I think folks are already starting to fill up here. Kev is very happy to see you, Terry. He hopes it's a weekly occurrence, but not at the expense of Rob and I. So maybe we'll take some turns taking time off so we can feature Terry a bit more here.
Thank you, Kev.
Leapsfrog is calling out that Rob seems to be gone for all the North American races. So while he was at Miami, Rob has a personal conflict today. So no, he's not in Canada today, but he does send his regards, and I'm going to keep a close eye out on his social media to see if we can find his lineup to share it with you all today. Luis wants to know Ocon or Tsunoda. That's going to jump right into one of my soapbox moments for this week. We haven't seen much from Alpine in the free practice sessions, but I love Esteban Ocon this weekend. He's in the news for all the wrong reasons. He and Alpine agreed to separate earlier this week, but he's due to serve that 5-place grid penalty for the incident on Pierre Gasly back in Monaco. He's tied for P4 with Perez for the most overtakes on the season. And since Alpine replaced his floor 4 weeks ago, his average qualifying position is P12. So this tells me a few things. This is a guy that qualifies right near the top 10, who's going to be dropped way below where the car actually performs, and he's able to overtake. Plus, he's got to keep it clean because he's currently auditioning for a seat next year. So I like what Ocon can do this year. And then one last fact as I start trickling in some of the driver form at the Canadian Grand Prix. Ocon has raced here 4 times. On all 4 occasions, he's reached Q3, and on all 4 occasions, he's scored points. So lots of good reasons to love Ocon this weekend. And for probably the first time this year, I'd take him over Yuki. Terry, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll be the same. I mean, all those bits on there, and I actually think that Daniel's probably performing a bit higher than Yuki as well this weekend. So if you give me the straight swap between Ocon and Yuki, I would probably go with Ocon, just based on that penalty doesn't hit him fancy points wise, dropping back down. So, and actually that's probably going to be an advantage being back there to start off with. We're expecting him to come past the Saubers, one of the Williams potentially in terms of the qualifying. So yeah.
A quick clarification, because I got this question a few times, is that 2 years ago, the positions gained or lost were based off your qualifying position, but for the last 2 years, it's based off your starting position. So the penalty is net positive for Ocon. Racing is Epic wants to know, Terry, what is your pecking order for the top 4 teams based on what we've seen here?
I wouldn't say Red Bull because I'd say Max rather than Red Bull because I think Max will still, even though he's not happy with the car, we've seen this from Max many times, so I still think Max will be in amongst it. I feel that McLaren have probably got a better setup than Ferrari this weekend. I know they said that the other way around in terms of the press conferences, how they thought it, but I'd probably say that then you've got Mercedes over Aston Martin in terms of coming up to the back end of that pack as well, based on what we've seen so far and what the weather forecast is doing.
Terry, our friends at FanAmp posted your Tech Corner article for this week. Could you talk a little bit about the impact of upgrades on some of those top 4 that you mentioned a moment ago?
Yeah, so McLaren and Ferrari didn't actually bring anything at all. Mercedes have brought a couple of things. So one is around the brake ducts, which we know Red Bull's done, which is just opening them up to let more air in. Since there's not really a huge sort of update on that sense. But Mercedes are obviously now running with that new front wing for Lewis we've been hearing so much about. So that little thin strip's gone and it's been replaced with a more traditional one. So Lewis run that in FP3 today for the first time. George obviously ran it in Monaco. They reverted to the old one yesterday to keep them safe in case there was an accident. And then with regards to Red Bull, they're actually running with a new rear wing. So they've made some changes to their rear wing on their car as well. So they have tweaked something. It is more to do with increasing the load. It's more to do with they're talking about the aerodynamics riding the curbs. it seems like we saw those little target dots yesterday. They're clearly having problems with something on the suspension. They haven't brought any updates to the suspension, so it's something that's inherited, and they're clearly checking something on it. And it feels very stiff when you look at the onboards with Max when he's going over the curb. So I think they're going to have to adjust something on that one, which may just compromise in terms of his performance. But I still think that Max alone is going to have enough. We saw him, half a second off Lewis, and he's not happy with the setup. So if they can find that sweet spot between now and qualifying, he's going to be right back in it.
Suspension for Red Bull has been an interesting question all weekend, because the thought going into this week was that with the bumps at this circuit, you might have to ride a similar suspension to what we saw in Monaco, which really makes the RB20 uncomfortable. But with some of the recent resurfacing, they thought that maybe the circuit would play back into the strengths of Red Bull, but clearly they still got a little bit of room to try to figure out the exact characteristics of the course.
Yeah, there's something clearly on the RB20 that doesn't like this sort of circuit. We know that last year, and I don't think it's something that's new. I think that last year the gap was a lot bigger. And I think when they made the adjustments, it got mitigated. So we saw obviously Singapore last year, but we saw a lot of tracks where the lead wasn't as much. And I think what we've got this year, because the pack's closer, the other teams now actually able to capitalise on it a bit more. So I think it's an inherent problem from what they've written rather than a new problem. They just haven't got that performance in the bag to pull away that they used to have.
I forgot my manners. Two things we usually talk about at the top of the show here. If you want a chance to win our 5th Gear Garms prize for this week, feel free to head over to our fan amp base and answer the question, which constructor scores the most points this weekend? Red Bull, Ferrari, or McLaren? We didn't know that Mercedes were going to be on the pace the way they were. Otherwise, we would have included them in the question. If you were to put Mercedes, I'm happy to enter you in the contest anyway. So feel free to enter your thoughts there. I think right now I'm still on probably Ferrari. I think I'm convinced enough that their engine's tuned down that they can clip the other two, and they're probably the best non-Red Bull team when it comes to the teammate points and fastest pit stop. So I think I'm going to hold on to Ferrari this week. Terry, does your answer change at all from a fantasy perspective as it does from the running order, or are you sticking with that?
I'll stick with what I got for that.
Good. And also, of course, while you're in our fan amp base, feel free to take a picture of your lineup, send it over to us. I can see our slide deck is starting to fill up, and Terry and I will get over to that in just a second. All right. So heading on down here.
Did you see that from Michael, Adam, about new Sims are out?
Ooh.
Yeah, I thought that one might catch your eye.
It does.
Sorry, they're deviating everybody off there, but
hold the phone. I think this is breaking news enough. Let's head on over and just see if anything changed a little bit. This is important because Ryder's based either in Asia or Australia, so this is 4 or 5 in the morning for him. So it was uncertain if we were going to get a post FP3 sim. So very, very kind of him to update things as he did. It looks like all of you ran there the second that Terry mentioned it, and now we've crashed their server. Okay, lovely.
Scott's just put the same thing up. What about this one, Adam? So Brian's put, he's got 3 transfers available this week. If he only uses 2, does he get 3 transfers next week, or is it just 2? So can he carry 1 over? Is there a thing what Brian's asking? Yes,
it still follows the policy of if you have an unused transfer, it will carry to the following week. You can't carry 2. And if you use a chip, say like Limitless or Wildcard, and you had a carried over transfer, you'd lose it. But in your situation, Brian, you would get the 3rd transfer for the next race.
Perfect.
This is very interesting because the big difference between the FP2 and FP3 sims is the script has flipped on Hamilton and Leclerc. The previous sim,
Alonso, wasn't it?
Yes, Alonso was up there too. So Leclerc, a popular 2X option with Alonso, the first driver there, but now it looks like very, very high regard for Hamilton, which is interesting. And well, that speaks to the next obvious thing in my mind. If you're running these two, it'd be worth a punt perhaps on autopilot. If you're really not sure who's going to score the most, you could always just play the chip that will move the 2X boost to whoever does score the most.
It's really good, cool.
So food for thought there. Let's see. What do they think about my Ocon pick? Yeah, he's still around P12 or so. So above the rest of the grid, but not enough to write home about right now. Very interesting. Let's see if anything else stands out here. As we go down to the constructors, if Ryder was answering our 5th Gear Garms contest question, who's going to score the most points, he would say still Red Bull, thinking if Checo gets into Q3, you get the teammate points and the pit stops. Lots of faith now in Mercedes. But you can see the difference here. Just 3 or 4 points. It's a matter of 2 overtakes and 2 positions gained between P2 and P4 there. So not a huge change. Tells me that there's not a lot of wrong answers in here.
Yeah. So just to answer, yeah, there you go. So just answer that question in chat. Why was Aston so high? It was based on their performance, wasn't it, in free practice 1 and 2. They kind of posted quite fast times in this, and that bumped him up in the sims originally.
You know, of all the, while I like Fernando Alonso and his form around this track is really good, Lance Stroll worries me. Let me read you his qualifying positions in 5 races here: 17, 17, 18, 18, 13. Something doesn't smell right about Lance Stroll at his home race. Usually I love the home race heroics. Maybe look at the driver of the day. Lance Stroll, not that lovable, not that good at home. So I'm not as in love with him as the early sims were. Elise had a question about why no 3X this week. You could, if you had enough confidence there. I've been advocating that we wait on the 3X chip until you have a good 3X driver and a good 2X driver without sacrificing the constructors, and you're starting to see some of that build here. I think I'm going to still hold on to it for one of those later in the season sprint races. I still think having that third event is going to get us enough points to really take that 3X up a notch, but we're finally starting to reach that point of the season where you can have a good 3X and 2X driver without making sacrifices. Good. Leapfrog makes a good counterpoint for all those bad Stroll qualifyings. He did finish in the top 10 a few times. So if you believe in the overtaking ability, you could certainly go for Stroll. And I think it speaks to some of these tier C drivers. If you want to take a punt on an Ocon or a Stroll with the hope that they get $1 million or $1.5 million in price gain, it's certainly worth it. He's at least managed to finish all these races, so the floor is pretty low on him. All right, we're approaching 20 minutes past the hour. Let's head over to some of these lineups and knock a few out here. So this first one is Tony. Tony's showing us his current lineup. This is, I think, from earlier in the week. I recall seeing Tony in our fan app base back on Monday or Tuesday. So an option with Max, an option with Leclerc and Piastri, and then another one with just slightly different midfield drivers. Right now, Tony, I think in light of everything we've learned today, I'd almost stick with what you have. It almost guarantees you're going to afford these options next week, which is what you're worried about for Spain. And Lewis has emerged as perhaps the best driver on the grid, not named Max. So I would stick with the current. Terry, any thoughts on this?
No, definitely. I mean, you've got Charles in there, you've got Lewis in there, you've then got your constructors with McLaren and Ferrari. I'd say it's a pretty strong lineup, to be honest, without changing too much and risking too much based on what we're seeing.
Good. All right. Faint, as always, giving us plenty of options here. So thank you to our producer, Elise, for putting a box around their current lineup. Looks like Leclerc, Ferrari, McLaren with good midfield drivers. We've got a few options here. So I like top right, Leclerc, Ferrari, Red Bull, Ocon with good midfield. So you're getting a piece of what Ryder's calling the top constructor on the grid this week in Red Bull, with all very solid midfield options to gain your cost cap. And then I also like the two on the bottom, the middle and the right. I think the only difference here is Yuki versus K-Mag, but then you have a whole lot of high upside cost cap growers like Stroll and Ocon too. So I think you couldn't go wrong with any of those.
There's some good selections out there, to be honest.
As I take a peek at the Sims and filter by highest cost cap gain, according to the Sim, it's Lance. So one more bean on the side of the scale for our favorite Canadian driver. All right, this next lineup is from Arkun. Sainz or Piastri or Verstappen build. Now, in fairness to this person, I saw this earlier in the week too, so a lot has transpired since then. I would offer either the Verstappen build with cheaper drivers. I think you can do this with, Max and Zhou or something. But I would say at this point, just pull Sainz out for Lewis and let the good times roll. You might have maybe $1 million or $2 million left over from this that you could then upgrade Valtteri into something a little bit higher or Hülkenberg into Ocon. Let's see. Jho9444 says Bottas or Gasly in this spot. I don't think you can go wrong in either case. Valtteri has really good form at this circuit, including multiple Q3 performances since he's left Mercedes. He's also pretty strong in the wet, but Gasly's also pretty strong in the wet and pretty strong in Canada. So I would say flip a coin on this one. Terry, do you have a preference?
I would probably go Valtteri, to be honest. I think he's pretty good around here. He's pretty handy. and I would just favour him a bit more over Gasly. But then Gasly's still vying for that Alpine seat. Will want a point to prove with what's happening in Esteban. So, like you say, I think it'd be very close between the two. I'm not too sure there's one that stands out as a definitely go for it. Just my personal choice, I'll probably go for Valtteri.
Sounds as good as any to me. I think the one other thing I would call it on this lineup is Lando. Of all the drivers that looked spectacular in the first practice sessions, Norris seemed pretty average. So I think of all the 2X drivers, I would line up at least Leclerc, if not Hamilton, ahead of Lando this weekend.
Yeah.
Terry, we talked about Valtteri a moment ago, but we haven't talked about his teammate, Zhou. Could you walk us through some of the misery that he had in the early practice sessions?
Oh, where did you start? I mean, he's clearly struggling this week. Yeah, both sessions he's had problems with. If you look at him, he sort of looked a bit lost on the pit wall looking at the data. He's not one I feel very confident at all going into this weekend. I don't think he's happy with the setup. I don't think he's happy with the car. He certainly doesn't fill me with any confidence. And for me personally, if I've got him in my team, I'm probably looking at an option to move him on for this week, certainly, because he's not giving me any sort of, any faith in anything. A lot of it's been driver error by looks for it. He looks like he's kind of trying to blame the car by looking at it, but it strikes me as a driver who's just struggling all round, really.
And you hit the nail on the head of what worried me the most. When he had the incident that triggered the red flag in FP3, his radio right after that was, guys, I don't know what happened. That's not a good sign if that's your last data point of a driver before you get into qualifying, that he has no idea why he's lost his back end. So I think the only data we've seen on Zhou is pretty negative. I would keep him as a break glass in case of emergency if you need the budget. But at this point, I'm almost thinking of keeping Logan over him just because he can at least trundle around at P19, P20 as long as he keeps it on the track. We have some upside there. Where Zhou, I still don't know what damage he's caused in the 2 sessions, what's left. Could it be something where they don't fix everything all the way and he might have something that ends his day early?
Yeah, I'm not too sure we're hearing too much of that. I know that Williams seemed pretty confident they'd do Alex Albon's damage as well. They said that they're cut it fine, but they were pretty confident he'd be fixed there after he hit the wall.
Oh, well, that's good. All right, let's slide down to the next one here. So, Mike, I saw your predicament earlier that he accidentally hit the continue button and locked in his team. So, locked in, oops, is what he called this team. And he's locked in with a pretty decent team. Leclerc, Piastri, and he's going in for Mercedes as the constructor. It's cheaper than McLaren. Because it's tier B, the upside of the price gain is higher, opens up a little bit of budget to improve some of this midfield so that you're not in Zhou and Sargent like some of us were last week. So, Mike, for an accident, it's a pretty happy accident.
Yeah, I've seen worse accidents, put it that way. I think Mike might just get away with that one.
Not too bad. Mastivos, one of our recent contest winners, agrees it is a confusing weekend. Where do we go from here? And I hope everyone is a Ferrari fan. I love that Team 3. All right, so Team 1 is a triple Ferrari. Team 2 is a straddle of Leclerc and Piastri. And Team 3 gets you back into Red Bull with Alonso. Ooh.
I'm not sure Team 3 is worth it.
The only way Team 3 is worth it is if you have an eye to Spain and you're trying to put one step in the door, take a little bit of dip on points for this week, but have one foot in the door for Spain. I think I've seen some people do that, but for this week, I'm also leaning toward teams 1 or 2, sort of a coin flip between Sainz and Piastri. I think the bottom row is the same, just in a different order.
Yes, isn't it? Yeah, looks like, yeah.
So it's confusing.
Do you do double Ferrari or do you go with Charles and Oscar, isn't it, in a nutshell?
Yes. When in doubt, I usually go with Carlos. But, I mean, at this point, he and Piastri have been running so close. Piastri was the better driver in this game last time out. So I don't think there are any wrong answers there either. Just you hope you have a driver that's in the top 6 or 7. That'll get you at least $500,000 in cost cap gain, as they're both still in Tier B. All right, this is normally Terry where we'd bring you in, but we get all Terry all the time, so we're just going to keep muscling through these lineups. Got about 20 minutes left for the contest question for those of you that haven't answered it yet. All right, Ty Fox wants to know, Piastri or Sainz? Zhou or Ocon? I think this is also from a little bit earlier this week, but I like your lineup.
Definitely Ocon.
I like this lineup as you have it. So Piastri or Sainz? Nah, keep Lewis. And then Ocon over Zhou.
Yeah. Yeah, I would keep that. I think, like you say, earlier in the week, it probably would have been a bit more of a debate, but I think from what we've seen, definitely go that way.
Good. All right. Sarah has sent us some notes. Her current team is a Leclerc, Red Bull, Ferrari build, and then she's looking to pivot to either a Hamilton, Mercedes build or keep her previous lineup and then just move Tsunoda into Stroll. And then that will roll a transfer into Spain. I'm very close between the two options because I think option 1 would probably net you about 10 or 15 more points this week, but option 2 would save you the 10-point transfer penalty. If option 1 needed to pivot into a Red Bull heavy build, I think it would take you at least 3 moves to get out of option 1. And there's your penalty that offsets the points from bringing in Hamilton and Mercedes and getting that extra boost this week. So while I think option 1's going to score the most, they're basically about even when you consider the value of that transfer.
Yeah.
Had to do some long division on that one, but I think either option 1 or 2 are better. I would definitely get out of your current team, though. Get some piece of the action for this week with either Hamilton or Stroll, both looking to be above their season averages. All right, this next team is from Head Piastri Chef. Final fix Piastri for Hamilton. Well, it's a little too early for that, but I think you bring up a very good point about the final fix. If there's any chip you should use this week, it's either autopilot if you're on Leclerc Hamilton, or final fix if you have a team out there and Leclerc really does look like a P10, P12 driver like we saw in FP3 and you want to move things around. So let's see what happens in qualifying. This is also a fairly low overtake circuit. So if the rain royally messes up one of your top drivers, let's say Leclerc or Hamilton are out in Q1, maybe we want to shuffle the deck with a final fix there. So in general, I would keep an eye on final fix after the session. And don't worry, Rob, Terry, myself, a lot of our peers in this space will be happy to let you know if there's an obvious shout for final fix. I haven't seen too many triple McLaren builds, so Head Piastri Chef is really, really feeling it. Smooth operator with no signs. All right, so this is
allowed?
I'll allow it.
Oh,
So this is Ferrari Mercedes at the top and Ferrari Mercedes at the bottom with 2 strong midfield drivers and then Sargent to enable the budget. I'm not sure if this is where you're starting or where you're finishing. I'd imagine you're finishing here. I like it. I think if it might take you a week or 2 to unpack this if Red Bull regain their form and Mercedes slide back down the pecking order a bit. But for this week, pretty strong build.
I'd go with it as well. Mercedes are pretty handy around Spain as well, to be honest. So it probably gives you a bit of leeway for the next race as well. You know, traditionally, the past couple of seasons, their performance has been okay around Spain. So it's probably not going to be too much of a bad race with the 2 races back to back from what we're seeing.
And, you know, I was looking up the recent fantasy form for Mercedes versus McLaren. I thought there was going to be just miles between the two of them. In the last 4 races combined, McLaren's outscored Mercedes by a combined 10 points. I mean, really, it's been that close between them these last few races where I don't doubt that Mercedes can have a good race in Spain too. Last one here is from Jeremy. Ooh, there we go. Jeremy again. Oh, very similar lineup to what we saw just a moment ago. So even better midfield drivers, that upgrade to Albon from Logan Sargent and then Leclerc Hamilton. So I approve, Jeremy. Very, very good. All right. I'm going to leave the team calculator up for anybody who's still making some decisions here while we go back to the chat.
Yeah, it's quite a bit now, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness. So Wesley wants to know, do you like Mercedes for McLaren to build budget due to the tier difference, or Lewis in for Oscar for potential driver of the day points if Lewis has a good race? Well, I didn't even think of driver of the day for Lewis.
Yeah. Very nostalgic if he gets a good result, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 reasons for nostalgia here for anybody who hasn't been keeping up with the history. This is the site of Lewis's first F1 win back in 2007. And with his race start tomorrow, he'll pass Jenson Button for the longest active F1 career of a UK-born driver. So big weekend for Lewis. I think if he finishes in the top 3, driver on the day is on the table. So you've talked me into it, Wesley. I like Lewis more than Mercedes.
Sorry, I was just saying that Yuki Tsunoda has just been given a new contract. So we were expecting that maybe it was Ollie Behrman, but it's actually Yuki Tsunoda has a 1-year deal with Visa Cash App RB.
Well, there you have it. Some breaking news in the Fantasy Formula Live.
Yeah, that should be coming through to everybody in about next couple of minutes, I'm sure, with their Formula One update. Should be notifying.
Dare I ask how I got to Terry before it got through the Formula One update, or is that for a private cup of coffee another time?
It's coming through now. Don't panic. Here we go.
Okay. Well, good news for Yuki fans. I don't think I've ever seen a driver signing between sessions announced like this. So,
no, I actually thought it was going to be Ollie Behrman, to be honest, because we're fully expecting that one. So I know that they've been talking positive about Yuki, but Yuki on a 1-year deal. It is only Yuki as well. There's no announcement on Daniel Ricciardo, and there you go. Formula One have just reposted it.
Good. There were some really positive quotes from Helmut Marko earlier this week about how it's a certainty that Yuki's going to be on the grid next season. I think he's been really consistent this year and really deserving of a seat. I think Jacques Villeneuve has really opened up a can of worms on what Daniel Ricciardo's future should be with his comments this weekend. So maybe they're letting the Daniel thing get some air before they talk about his status for next year.
Right, I'm back out. Let's get back to the chat. Sorry about that.
Sure. All right. So Mike wants to know, since I accidentally locked in this team last night, would I take a -10 for Lewis over Oscar or a final fix? My gut right now is watch qualifying and then see if you need the final fix. Because not only could Mercedes get back to their Saturday swoon and Lewis have a tough session, that rain could turn everything upside down. So taking the -10 and then potentially being wrong to me, I would almost rather keep Oscar and then see if the final fix can unmess it up if there's a huge delta.
Yeah, definitely. Mercedes or McLaren? Interesting call.
Depends who you're asking. You can see on the screen here, the Sims say Mercedes. I'm sticking with McLaren so I can run Lewis and then not have too many moves to make coming out of the weekend, but certainly can't fault you if you run McLaren. I'm sorry, if you run Mercedes.
That's the interesting one. Should you take a -10 to get Joe out? Or be inclined to?
It's very close at that point. A -10 would basically mean, do you think Joe's going to DNF?
Yeah.
I guess because I think in the betting world, the low drivers have like a 9% chance of DNFing. So even in Joe's case, even if it was double this week, the odds are still that he wouldn't. So I'm very slightly on the line of don't take the -10, but wouldn't fault you if you did either. Built Diff wants to know Sainz or Hamilton. I have that same decision too. So you're going to see me pivot to my lineup in about 5 minutes and I will begin my lineup anxiety for the week. Right now I'm leaning toward Hamilton.
Yeah, I would as well currently.
All right. Daniel wants to know Hulk or Gasly. Ooh, that's interesting. You know, Hulk qualified. Didn't he qualify up in the front row last year? And then he had a little grid penalty. So his form here is really good. But I think Gasly, I would trust a little bit more in the wet. But man, these two are pretty close.
I think it is close. And I think qualifying, just that bit of rain when it hits is going to be crucial here as well. Because that could really mix the grid up. If it becomes mid-qualifying, and someone's already put a time out, gone out early, it could throw some really interesting grid positions up as well.
Canner wants to know, are you guys hopping on the Merc hype train? Choo choo. I'm in. I've been waiting years for the Merc hype train to finally get some steam. I would love to see a Lewis win. I will be jumping off the couch if it happens. Martin wants to know, no Verstappen. So, you know, you can see here, Max still predicted to be the top driver on the grid this week, and I think he'll feature in some teams. But the difference here is that he's so expensive compared to other drivers that should do mostly as well, you know, particularly Lewis and Leclerc. And then it also closes up some of the opportunity for better midfield drivers. A lot of us can only run max with double Sauber, Logan Sargent, Hulkenberg, the bottom 4 drivers on the grid in terms of price. So I think a lot of folks are pivoting away from max just because they want to get some of these cost cap gains now. A 2X driver that's in tier B, multiple options in tier B, or multiple options in tier C with high upside. All right. Ty Fox. Oh, it was addressing another question here. Ocon or Tsunoda? I'd like Ocon over Tsunoda this week, but
yeah,
hopefully I don't regret that. Okay, now I'm caught up with the question you called out earlier about the -10 for Joe. Ooh, Jeremy wants to know 2X Charles or Lewis. Again, my gut says stick with Charles. The track record is there. 10 straight races of 20 or more points in fantasy. It doesn't get more locked in than Charles, but also Lewis is looking extra special this week. So as a differential play, I can see why you're tempted, but I think I'm going to stick with the safe thing with Charles, run Lewis alongside of him, and hope that it doesn't bite me too bad.
just have a look in there.
Interestingly, the driver who qualifies first has finished the race every year since 2008. And in 2008, that was that famous incident between Hamilton rear-ending Kimi Räikkönen at the end of the pit lane. He didn't see the red light, smash right into him. So that's the last time a driver qualified on pole and DNF this race. So good news for whoever does survive qualifying today in P1. I think it's a good look for them. Elise wants to know Tsunoda or Ricciardo. So, Terry, let me ask you this. You said earlier Ricciardo's looking a little bit better on the weekend. Tsunoda's got a big weight off of his shoulders with the announcement you just made about his contract. Who would you take this week?
Probably now I'll probably go for Yuki. but then Daniel's going to be fighting for his future, isn't he? Because that leaves, obviously that seat, Liam Lawson look over his shoulder, as we know. So actually he's going to have a point to prove. The fact that Yuki's now secure, it might even go the opposite way. And actually he needs some performances, because we know last year they actually confirmed them both together. The fact they've only done Yuki means there's obviously still a discussion to be had over Daniel and over obviously Liam Lawson coming in. We know there's been talk that he's potentially have it in his contract to come in. I think Helmut Marko said this week that if he doesn't get a seat, he's actually free to talk to anybody else. So there's a lot of pressure on Red Bull to put Liam in that seat. So I would probably go for Daniel on that basis. He's kind of got it all online at the moment, which, sometimes we see the best out of drivers. And Jack Villeneuve's comments, maybe he's going to, want to show him actually what he can do.
Absolutely. And it's kind of the theory that I have with Ocon, is that these drivers that are getting increasingly desperate to get a race seat next year might be really on watch. At the very least, they're not going to do anything too audacious, something that could result in a DNF. Ocon certainly can't afford back-to-back DNFs. Danny really needs to out-qualify Tsunoda and get his season back on track. There's still time for it, but the seats are running out for him. All right. I want to share. Rob has posted his team. And so let's see, Rob, can you make my life just a little bit easier here? There we go. We can see that all right. So he's gone for the base. So the lineup he had last week was what you see here with McLaren and Piastri, and he's replaced them with Hamilton, Mercedes. So he's drinking the Mercedes Kool-Aid. I love that. I don't think we've run Mercedes and Hamilton together since Coda last year, when Hamilton got disqualified and we lost a ton of points together. So I wish him a much better result this week.
Yeah, definitely. It looks a pretty strong one though. But he has got Joe in there and Logan Sargent. So it is risky still.
Let's see. What does he say in his comments here? You can see he's still questioning his 2X. So you can see it pictured here with Leclerc, but he may slide it over to Hamilton. I wonder if he's considering the autopilot just to hedge his bet so he can enjoy his weekend without too much stress. Excellent. All right. I'll put it back on the team calculator while we go back to the chat. And I'd say in about 2 minutes, I'll head over to my team and we can start some of that Odyssey next. Oh, I see Ewan in the chat. Thanks for the comment, Ewan. I enjoyed your show earlier as well. William says he's 11 in the world. What do I pick? Oh, William, you've got a big decision, my friend.
Wow. I'm not sure I feel that pressure.
Leclerc on the 2X with Piastri, Sargent, Bottas, Tsunoda, Ferrari, McLaren with 2 transfers. I think if you want to keep pace with the movement we've had this week, I think Piastri to... Can you do it? Can you afford Piastri to Hamilton? It would be... I don't know how much money he has left over. There's a difference of 0.9 million between the two. So potentially move from Tsunoda at 9.8 to something a little lower, maybe one of the Haas drivers, or if you're close, downgrade to Ocon. That would free up 0.6 million. And if you have the rest banked, you could make that move so that you've got a piece of Ocon and Hamilton, probably the 2 hottest drivers, and then a pretty safe core the rest of the way down. That way, win or lose, you're not going terribly far off the pack.
Some good maths there. I'm impressed.
It's incredible. I'm just outside the top 1,000, and I thought I was cool, but 11th in the world. That is pretty excellent.
I'm not after Monaco, but we won't touch on that one. Let's just move on.
Monaco, it definitely threw a lot of people for a loop. I tweeted this out the other day. Is that in the weekend warm-up, Laura Winter said that 200,000 teams in the Global League finished with negative points in Monaco. So probably the biggest curveball of any Grand Prix I've seen in my time playing the game.
I actually was going to pay the no negative and didn't, and I'm absolutely kicking myself because I even pressed it at least twice and then didn't confirm it.
And then it gives you the message, "Are you sure?" And you went,
"Are you sure?" And then I went, "No, I'm not sure." And then both passes got disqualified and then crashed out, and I was like, I should have been sure.
I know. Don't worry. There's still going to be plenty of opportunities to use that no negative. If you use it at a sprint later in the season, I think it's going to help you out really well too. So plenty of time to catch up on it.
Yeah, it would have been a master stroke though.
I'm terrified that I'm going to run out of time to work on my team. So I'm going to bring it up for you right now. This is what I'm starting the week with. Triple Ferrari, McLaren, double Sauber, and Sargent. I know one thing's for sure. This back line is not staying the way it is. So a few options here. The one that feels good in my heart right now is Lewis and Ocon. That gives me a little bit of money left in the bank here. And so I've got 3 of my favorite wet race, historians here with Hamilton, Bottas, and Ocon. Sargent, I'm going to have to really say a few prayers for because I don't quite trust him in the rain. But then with Leclerc, McLaren, Ferrari, a pretty solid base that won't let me down. I like that. What happens if I play around a little bit more? A lot of folks have Piastri here. What would that leave me with? Ooh, something like a Haas down here. So that little difference between Piastri and Hamilton might be meaningful of what I can afford in the rest of my team. What happens if I go with Mercedes? Now I've got 34 million to spread out over 2 drivers. Now we're asking me to do math on a live stream. Dangerous proposition. You could get into everyone's favorite combination of Aston Martins. That's not bad. What else can we do? If I go cheap again, I really don't want Joe, but what can I afford up here? But you could do Charles and Lando. Ooh, that would get pretty interesting.
Interesting is you've got Logan Sargent in, Adam. A lot of people are asking -10 to remove Logan. Would you take it?
Okay, so here's where my head's at with this. I have double Sauber and Logan to enter the week. I'm sort of at peace with the fact that I need to keep 2-ish of them if I'm to do some moves that get Hamilton in. For me, I love Valtteri, his form at this track and his form in wet weather, so I'm keeping him. So then it comes down to Joe or Sargent. I don't trust either of them, but Joe has been miserable all weekend. Yeah. 2 red flags, no data, and I'm worried that he just doesn't know enough that the car is even going to finish the race with all the changes that they're making in his form around here. I just have to hope that Sargent is, getting lapped and he's a minute and a half off the pace, but he just sees the checkered flag. So I think I'm leaning toward keeping these 2. Terry, what would you do?
I'm not sure he's worth taking a minus to get rid of him, because I think did I just see someone's just put in the chat that there's if he actually grows in price, it's a big win, isn't it? So I'm not convinced that you're going to get a better combination by doing it that way, to be honest. So I would be inclined to keep him rather than for a -10. If you're taking a negative just to get him out, so I'm not convinced it's gonna benefit you enough with whoever you're bringing in to replace him.
And for those of you considering Mercedes, this was a point I had made earlier. Look at this form these last 4 weeks. I think they've been pretty undervalued, only run on 14% of teams. I would take these scores week after week. And I'd take any of these scores for Canada if you were trying to enable some budget or trying to get some tier B price increases. So not too shabby out of Mercedes.
Cool. So Fan Amp is saying that the team on the ground in Montreal has got sunny skies with a period of light rain expected in around 25 minutes.
Ooh, interesting. So
my opinion?
That being said, Terry, do you suppose that these teams are going to get out right at the green light of Q1 and try to crush a lap before the rain comes?
Yeah, definitely. I think they're trying to get a banker lap in. I think most of the teams we're all looking at it. They're trying to set at least one if they can, with the traffic. So looking at that time, we're 25 minutes. So yeah, that should see just after the green light, isn't it? So I think we're going to see a big queue when that green light goes. So look at that one for the start of qualifying. What's my opinion on the Haas drivers after Monaco? I think you should just get rid of him where you can. I'm joking.
Terry is very jaded. I get it. If you get double a negative 30+ points, I can see why you'd want to put him on a boat and sink it.
Yeah, if I could, I would. But then I also kind of feel they owe me now. Yeah, I'm invested now in them. So
it's true. And yes, my theory is usually when someone has a catastrophic week, everybody is just really minding their P's and Q's the next week. Everything should be above board. Certainly Haas is going to set themselves up for another DQ. They're going to make sure that they're not crashing during the race. I think they're going to be on their best behavior. Terry, I want to make sure we've got good time for the contest later and the rest of our questions. So I'm going to lock in Hamilton and Esteban Ocon in, Sainz and Zhou Guanyu out, keeping McLaren as my second constructor.
Ooh.
Whew. All right. There goes nothing.
Yeah.
All right. Do you mind taking a question in the chat? I'm just going to paste a picture of this into my socials.
So look what we've got. Can't afford Ocon, Hulk, or Gasly. I would probably go for Hulk on that one. Yuki or Lance? Ooh. Yuki.
Ooh.
Oh, -10 to swap Sargent for Ocon.
Ooh, I kind of like that though.
Yeah, I kind of might be tempted to go with that one.
So for me, the points will be close. I don't think Ocon's going to get more than 10 points to cancel out the negative that you took. I love the benefit he could bring you in terms of cost cap increase. Sargent's going to need multiple drivers to DNF, so he moves way up and that the average is dropped for him to get any sort of gain. Whereas if Ocon finishes with 7 or 8 points, he should get at least $500,000, if not $1 million. And that to me is worth a few points. Terry, LD wants to know what you're running.
I was just seeing what I was actually running. I'm keeping my faith with Max. I've got Max, Hulkenberg, Bottas, Yuki, Magnussen, and Ferrari, McLaren. So I haven't jumped on the Mercedes train just yet. I still feel Max is going to bring up, and I still feel that there's more to come from the Ferrari and the McLaren still. So
it definitely feels like there's something to be had there for sure. And I agree. If for those of you that do have Verstappen in your lineups, it would take a lot of moves to undo that, go all in on Mercedes, and then go all the way back into Red Bull for Spain. So if I was in Terry's shoes, I'd do something very similar too.
Yeah, it's more about keeping it, I think. Yeah, rather than actually. I just think Max can put out the bag around it. I think he showed that he was close enough with the setup problems he got. So I'm still fully expecting him to do well.
Good. We've got a few more lineup entries. Let's check a few of these out here. This is Shadow F1. They want to know McLaren and Ferrari, 2, Mercedes and Red Bull. Save the third or anyone to Ocon. McLaren and Ferrari versus Mercedes and Red Bull.
I'm not sure about Checo with the Red Bull one. It's probably my only one. I still feel McLaren and Ferrari would give you more than potentially that because of that.
You bring up a good point. I've been on my high horse about qualifying form at this circuit. Last 4 for Checo, 10, 16, 13, 12. His finishes, 14, 12 DNF and a 6 last year. So this is not a place where Checo particularly thrives.
No.
So I would say, I guess that to address the question, I would keep McLaren and Ferrari.
Yeah.
And Terry and I appear to be on opposite sides of the fence. Tsunoda's been the safest driver throughout the course of the season. So I understand if you keep him. I am a big fan of taking the punt on Ocon with the hope that he can make some moves with all the news surrounding him and the grid penalty for the overtaking. This last team, is this the same one? Oh, there we go. This is exactly what Rob ran last week. So I say we found Rob's burner account. So I would recommend something either similar to what Rob did, pivoting into Lewis and Mercedes here in place of Piastri or McLaren, or at least trying to get yourself out of having 3 of the back markers on your team here. If you could either downgrade Piastri into an Aston Martin and try to pull up one of these other bottom drivers into, I think you might even be able to get into both of the Aston Martins or close to it with your extra cost cap. So few options there.
No negative chip, Adam, would you run that? I would probably still save one. I'm still saving one for later on. I'm not sure this is one where we're going to get too much of a use from it, if I'm honest.
I'm still of the opinion that we should save it for a sprint weekend. That way you have qualifying and a race ×2 to buffer DNFs and positions lost. I've found that in the rain, the odds of these guys DNFing is about the same as in the dry conditions. Things tend to slow way down. The field separates a lot. You have safety cars. There are a lot of things that are preventing the higher DNFs that usually no negatives are used for. So I think in the last year or so, the main theory around no negative has shifted a bit. Good. Let's move on to our contest. Looks like the entries are starting to fill up here. So I'm going to copy them all over.
Wild cards are a good entry for this race to completely start over with Mercedes. I'm not sure that.
This is a but. You can wild card into it, but how are you going to get out of it?
Good point.
So I think it makes sense if you're making a couple of moves, but it's very hard now if Mercedes aren't the latest and greatest team to be running in the top 3. It would be a lot of moves to get out of it. And potentially using a chip 1 week and taking a -10 or -20 in Spain, that would be really painful. So I would say go with whatever you can afford, plus at most a -10.
Yeah, I'd feel more confident if this was after 3 good practice sessions with lots of running rather than just one after what happened yesterday.
Exactly. I would definitely
on it.
That's a great point. This goes back to how we started the show. There's so little data this week that what we're finding is anecdotal. We're trying to bring in history. We're trying to make some assumptions. I would use the wild card when a lot more is known. Same thing with things like the 3x boost that came up earlier. Let's make sure we know a lot.
What Jacob's saying is if he doesn't take a wild card, though, he takes a -30. I'd probably say if you're getting towards a -30 for changes, then you probably need to take the wild card.
Yes. So if for example, you've made these moves already and you're looking at a -30, yes, take the wild card, and then worst case scenario, take 2 weeks to back those moves out. Just use your 2 free transfers and then another 2 free transfers, or roll the dice and see if Mercedes are on the pace in Spain. All right, I'm going to hit this wheel to see who wins our prize this week from Fifth Gear Garms. I'm wearing my Senna shirt from them that I just picked up. Ooh, it's B-Cats. Congratulations to you, B-Cats.
Congratulations.
We'll be in touch on getting you your prize. Looking forward to see what you pick out with it. Looks like we've had some really diverse winners in the last few weeks here. So glad to see the love getting spread out amongst everybody.
Yeah, they got some fantastic products as well. I saw some firsthand and the other week at the Monaco watch party, and there's some really good quality products there.
So jealous of that watch party. A lot of fun friends there.
It was good, yeah. No, it was good. It was something a bit out of the difference as well. You know, I quite like doing ones like that rather than the traditional sort of F1 arcade ones and things. It was really good to network and just meet normal fans. The race may not have been the best, but the company was certainly good.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I'm quite jealous. For those of you that are considering the final fix, by the way, just a reminder on a couple of the rules. You have to be able to afford the asset that you bring in, so it's not just a free move for anybody. If you remove your 2x driver, it's the driver that comes in that gets the 2x boost. You can't then reassign it to someone else, and you can't make a final fix move for a constructor. I think there was a glitch in the game that would let you pick a constructor, and then when you went to save your team, it would say, actually, I don't let you do that. So just a reminder on some of those final fix rules. Keep an eye on all of our socials. Even Rob, wherever he is, will be sure to post if there's a good look for final fix. There were a few last week at Monaco, but only a few of us were able to take advantage of it. All right. Desex wants to see our final teams. I've got mine still over here. Let me show you. So I ended up going with Leclerc, Hamilton, Ocon, Sargent, and Bottas, basically keeping my team from last week and using my 2 transfers on Lewis and Ocon. Using Lewis's really strong results so far this weekend, Ocon's penalty and his good form at this circuit, and then just a stable core with Leclerc and the 2 constructors. Terry, I'm probably not going to remember your whole team, but you're sticking with a Verstappen-based build. Not only because it's the path of least resistance on transfers, but you're thinking that Red Bull, at least the top of Red Bull, is going to be maintaining their form.
Yeah, I've got Max, Hulkenberg, Bottas, Yuki, Kevin Magnussen, and then Ferrari, McLaren with mine. So I've kind of stuck with pretty much what I had coming out of Monaco.
Good.
Despite the temptation to bin Haas off.
Ileana's locked in a team with Leclerc and Hamilton like I did, only with autopilot. I hope this doesn't come back to bite me.
My 2 thoughts on Rob's decision: would you 2x Lewis or Charles?
I say Charles. I mean, as someone who has that option, I'm going with Charles. But you can see in the Sims here, a lot of them prefer Lewis. But you can see it's such a fine margin. It's really a matter of a position at a time where rain's going to be rolling in by the end of Q1. So there's so little to be known about that. Terry, any final thoughts in the last 2 minutes before we head off to watch qualifying?
No, not really. I think it's been quite enjoyable. Apologies that I may not get to Rob's scratch on Fantasy Formula, but at least we got some Yuki breaking news.
That's fantastic. You know, we haven't had breaking news on this show before, so we're really glad to have you on. Rob owes us all a shoey because he promised on the Tuesday show that he was going to celebrate Piastri's podium last time out. So hopefully he gets us back sometime soon. I wasn't going to hold you to it, Terry. No. We'll make sure that Rob delivers next time.
Certainly not in my shoes. I wouldn't like to do it.
So in a race weekend where we have so little data, this sort of perspective is going to be really helpful moving forward as we set our lineups. Good luck to all of you this weekend at Canada, and we'll see you right back here in 2 weeks for Spain.
Thank you, everybody.